All right, you guys, thank you for joining us. I am JC, Mob Entertainment Group. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. Of course, become a channel member. And if you do enjoy this episode, feel free to cash out Mobster Entertainment. Today, we're going to be doing something new. Well, it's sort of something we used to do a couple years ago, but we're going to be doing a variation of now. We are going to be taking a look at some of the California mob figures. And so one of the things I obviously do is I dispel the rumors and the myths and the glamorization that comes with the media image and portrayal of the mob. I myself, having been around some of them, I can attest to the fact that they're not all quote unquote good fellas. And believe me, they're only good fellas if they're robbing somebody else. Once they're robbing you, they're not so good anymore. But anyhow, without further ado, I have a guy here. He has the perfect name for doing these kinds of shows, these true crime kind of shows. I have William, aka Bill Crooks. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Salud. Thank you, my friend. And yeah, it is my name. A lot of people thought I had a stage name, and it never even occurred to me. I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, no, that's my name. It just kind of worked out that way. But it's good to be here, man. Long time coming. If you don't know me, I do a podcast, or used to, called Partners in Crime. And it's a different take, I think. We did a lot of old gangster stories and stuff. Right off the bat, just a normal guy. I wasn't a gangster. I wasn't in the mafia and stuff. I always say I'm nothing to worry about. You can trust me. But we would do old gangster stories and stuff, and I kind of put a different spin on it. And my perception of gangster stories back then was, when I got started, there wasn't very many of them. You didn't have all these shows and stuff. MobTube didn't exist when I got into this. And I wanted one. I wanted to hear one. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do a few. I'll do 2 or 3. But I always kind of targeted it for like middle-aged guys, middle-aged women that are driving on vacation, don't have anything to listen to. I never thought I'd be an expert to the mob groupies and the guys that are reading FBI files and doing all that stuff. So I consider myself a little bit of an expert if you're a normal guy with a passing interest. Also, a storyteller. I think my gift is I can tell a story with drama and flair. If you listen to Partners in Crime or my new one, Extraordination, which has some gangsters, some other kinds of stories, I put a lot of music, a lot of sound effects, a lot of drama, and just I try to be like an inch over campy, where it's kind of like you wonder if I'm kidding. You know what I mean? Some people don't, they're like, oh, this is awesome. And other people are like, dude, you're a little over the top. I'm like, yeah, that's what I want. I want to be just a hair over the top. So if you haven't heard it, check it out. It's a lot of fun. And you might want to cue past the first 5 minutes, because that's just me and my family shooting the crap, so enjoy.
That is a great intro. I love how you introduced yourself there, your channels. And I can attest to this guy's talent. He got started pretty close to the same time I started doing some of these shows. And the way that I got started was my friends and I protested some of these lockdowns in California. And Gene Borello saw me and my friends, or my friends and I, if I want to use proper English here, on the news. And at the time, he and John Alight were doing their show, and a bunch of their plans for their show were getting put on hold because New York had similar garbage rules that California had during. I'm not going to get into the names of all the stuff, because we know how YouTube is about that. But we know what they were doing. They locked down our businesses and all this other garbage. So Gene saw me and was like, man, I really appreciate what you guys did. I mean, if it was on the local news in New York. And he found me on IG, and we were chatting, and I had actually seen a couple of the shows with him and John. I had seen the one with Anthony Aralotta and Bobby Luisi, and I also had seen the one where Hootie was in studio. And so I told him, I said, yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with you, Gene. I'm more familiar with John Alight because of his history with Gotti Jr. and all he's been in the media longer. And then we started chatting from there, and I showed Gene some clips from interviews I had done on the news here locally back in like 2017, and that were more focused on treatment stuff and getting out of the system. It wasn't really my personal history prior to that, because I wasn't trying to go out and tell war stories and try to glamorize anything or try to do that kind of stuff. Back then, the shows that I was on we were focusing on reform and self-change and things like that, positive change. And I appeared on some panels with some of Freeway Rick Ross's guys, one of which was a guy who I've known for a long time. He was one of his top guys in my area in the 80s and went away for 10 plus years for moving bricks of coke. And so, I was on there more sharing the getting away from the drug business stuff and the marijuana business that I had been involved with and the illegal gambling I was involved with. And so Gene sees this stuff and we started chatting some more, and I let him know who I was connected to back then and how I was connected with Detroit. There was Chaldeans that were sort of in between who did a lot of the stuff out here. And from there, I was gonna actually go on the John and Gene show, but unfortunately their show had some issues when Gene got himself in trouble way back when. And so that kind of, and then that through Hootie and I were supposed to both go on there. Hootie had already been on there that one time. We were going to go on there as the Hootie and JC show and all that good stuff, but it didn't happen because after Gene, got arrested back around Valentine's Day of, I want to say 2021, it's been a minute. It just sort of, it put things into a holding pattern that became a lot longer holding pattern than I had wanted. But be that as it may, sometimes the best things come to those who wait. And back then, Bill Crooks, I could tell with your first shows that you and a few others were guys that could be around for a while and that you had some real talent to do this, your storytelling skills, your research. And so fast forward, here we are, and I can guarantee the way the genre will evolve from here is going to be positive because a lot of the issues that did mess up a lot of these shows are now gone and aren't coming back. And you're seeing more collaboration now with the guys that have the big shows. You see Sammy, Mike Franzese, and others reaching out to John Alight and others now. And that kind of collaboration amongst shows is what's going to end up making sort of a solid foundation for the people that are fans of these types of shows, to where you'll have content to watch and you don't have to listen to people arguing with each other or, ex-mob figures battling it out for who's the toughest guy on YouTube.
Yeah, I agree. And it's worth noting, like you said, though, John and Gene, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, they're the ones that really got this off. So whether it's Sammy or Michael, whoever you're enjoying now, it was John and Gene that really kind of kicked it into a level that people started to notice,
I would agree with that. Sammy and Mike Franzese obviously has a large audience, but in terms of the podcast format where there's a camera and they're going through old stories, I think that John and Gene definitely are the pioneers of the two-person, format of two ex guys from different generations. Obviously, Frank Collada did a show for a while there before he passed on. Rest in peace, Frank. He did his by himself. He told old war stories, but that was sort of a different format than, in terms of the new era guys or the most recent sort of Gen X guys. I think you're absolutely right that John and Gene, they were definitely pioneers, and they both have some good things coming up. And speaking of which, Gene will be out on August 1st, I believe. So Gene has like 3 more weeks of sitting in the fishbowl for a minute, and ultimately they'll let him out. So 3 more weeks, and Gene can finally eat a real meal. So that's
hopefully he comes out and he stays out.
Yeah, I know. Gene, you know me, Gene. You know what I'm going to say? The first thing I'm going to tell you is I told you so. And after that, Gene, I'm going to say, all right, now will you listen? I did tell him a few times he had to chill out a bit. That I'm like, YouTube ain't the streets, bro. And these clowns are just trying to get you to say stuff and do stuff that'll get you in trouble. And the clown that instigated it will probably be long gone or nowhere near a police precinct when all is said and done. So they want to get guys like him riled up so they can get sound bites. I used to try that with Gunner. They've tried it with lots of people. They used to try to get Gunner riled up, and eventually Gunner figured out that these are just YouTube trolls, and don't feed them. Although Gunner, you still make the mistake of feeding them every so often, but what can you do? You do at least when you're feeding them for your own entertainment and your own enjoyment. All right, so
Yeah.
you're
He's
sort
come
of
a long way, though. I think his temperament has calmed down.
I remember the days when Gunner was literally ready to grab a sledgehammer and hit his computer screen. He was getting so mad at some of these people.
Yeah, we'll buy a plane ticket and go visit someone.
Yeah. Gunner's writing a big old long paragraph in the comment section. Come see me. Come to my house. You see what happened? You come to my house. You know what happened if you came to my house? He's graphically describing what he's going to do to this internet troll. But hey, you gotta love it. So speaking of tough guys and the blow and coke and the other stuff, today we're going to be taking a look at a guy named Sam Sarcinelli. Now, this guy was from the Chicago outfit. He was out here in California after a number of years back there, and he was moving a lot of coke weight. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by playing some great footage from Mob Facts. Mob Facts has a great YouTube channel. He has some of the best footage that I've seen for a lot of this stuff. And this is courtesy of Mob Facts. We'll be offering some commentary, and I believe you'll find this very interesting.
From our Unit 5 investigative team tonight, there is documented evidence of the mob's latest big moneymaker. We're going to see how organized crime is involved in Chicago's cocaine trade. Rich Samuels joins us now to tell us who is involved.
Linda, cocaine is now the biggest moneymaker for those who deal in illicit drugs, and organized crime has recently acquired a big corner in the cocaine market. Among the reputed mobsters believed to control the cocaine market is a former Chicagoan, whose dealings have attracted the attention of investigators from coast to coast. Usually, we introduce the subjects of our reports, but tonight, Sam Sarcinelli himself does the honors.
Bro, he just has that look like, oh, you talking to me?
Do you think Joe Pesci's doing him?
What's that?
Do you think Joe Pesci is doing him? Because when I saw him, I'm like, that's what Joe Pesci's doing.
Yeah.
Sarcinelli, according to his attorney, is a complex man with many facets.
Oh, I bet he's complex.
Hi, my name's Rich.
Hi, Sam Sarcinelli.
Sam Sarcinelli is an outgoing,
Yeah, hey, how you doing, buddy? I'm a big time kilo moving mafioso. Nice to meet you.
roller who's traveled extensively in a leased Learjet. A Learjet investigators believe has been used to transport cocaine. Who's kept company with
there we go.
I can't
quit not in love anymore.
Michael McDonald.
Right there, Mike McDonald. I can't forget.
On a large scale, and who's dealt in high-priced California real estate through an operation investigators believe was used in part to launder drug money. Sam Sarcinelli, according to Chicago police intelligence, is a crook. A crook, they say, is the man in charge of narcotics for the Chicago mob.
Now he's like, he's like, who, me? No.
Yeah, at first he thought it was going to be like a business opportunity, like, Sam Sarcinelli, what can you do for me? And then he's like, crap.
Sam Sarcinelli, however, is that you're not likely to find him in Chicago. That's because for the last 5 years or so, he's been living here, Southern California. Most recently, in a house overlooking the Woodland Hills area of Los Angeles. And at his Woodland Hills office, Sarcinelli has surrounded himself with an ever-changing cast of characters. Some, like their boss, have migrated west from Chicago to California. But all are the subjects of continuing federal investigations by federal and local authorities. Investigations centering on
that guy looked like the lawyer from Carlito's Way, Sean Penn's character. Yeah. That dude was like dead on for Sean Penn's character. And then this guy, that's definitely a mob look there with the big 70s Italian hair with the
yeah, I think it's a style that's not likely to come back soon. Because it'd be too toxically masculine.
Sam Sarcinelli has described himself as a self-employed stock and real estate broker.
Oh, he's self-employed, all right.
His business causes him to travel throughout the country, in his words, living out of a suitcase.
Now that's kind of ironic too. I bet he carries lots of suitcases back and forth. So he's probably not lying when he says he lives out of a suitcase.
The suitcase has like this much room for his clothes.
A suitcase with a lot of stuff where the clothes are wrapped around it.
Yeah.
At a Fort Lauderdale motel, one of his suitcases was opened by federal narcotics agents and found to contain $55,000 in cash. Sarcinelli's motel suite also yielded 13 pounds of cocaine, which he was
Yeah, he's not going to be able to blame that one on personal use. 13 pounds. Yeah, you know.
allegedly offered to sell for
But officer, I'm having a stripper over later.
$275,000. That was in June 1979. Curiously, as of December of last year, Sarcinelli had filed no personal tax return for 1979.
There we go.
Or for 1978, or 1977, or 1976, or 1975.
Look at that. There you go. When they add,
That's astounding to me. You know, how long ago did they take down Capone?
yes.
You've got all these shell corporations. You've got this bogus real estate thing. He's got a bogus insurance thing that's already gone down. How could you not file taxes?
Yeah, he should have at least filed like a basic return and showing the amount of money that someone in that industry would be making, and then just pay a little bit to the government, whatever,
Taxes,
you know.
yeah.
And look, though, in his defense, one reason why this caught my attention is because I have as trolls have found out, I've had a few years I didn't file taxes either. And so, you know, yes, I was living off of cannabis money, quite frankly. And if the IRS would like to hit me with a tax bill, then I'm going to tell the IRS that I get to take all the same tax deductions. So if you guys ever try to hit me with an old tax bill, I'm gonna go find every restaurant receipt I have from the 90s. I'm writing all that stuff off the way a normal, you know, businessman could if in a real tax case. So we'll see what happens there. I'll write it all off. But
right, and I don't know if they can actually tax you for ill-gotten gains. They can only seize your money. They would also have to prove how much money you made, which would be virtually impossible in your situation.
yes, hence why I don't ever really put out exact amounts of what I've earned. I've had people ask, and I'll give people theoretical answers. But yeah, Sarcinelli, that's very suspect. And it's sort of like with John Gotti, right? Remember, John Gotti was a plumbing salesman, yes?
Right.
But yet he's living the life of a guy that makes a lot more than the average plumbing salesman. On top of that, I'm willing to bet that throughout the entire time the feds had him tapped, never once did he actually talk to a customer or anything about plumbing supplies, which is another issue. If you're going to do a front occupation, you got to make sure you're actually doing some of the stuff. So if you get put under surveillance, at least your lawyer can say, hey, the agents themselves saw him at his place of business. The agents
and I think the difference too is Gotti liked the attention. That camera in his face was not something he necessarily wanted to get away from.
Certainly.
Like to be a boss. Sarcinelli's a little different. When the camera's there, he wants to get the hell out of there. He doesn't want you to know his name. And really, most people don't know his name, and that's kind of by design. You know,
and you know what? He did handle it quite well, because back then, a lot of the guys used to just tell the media, F you, like Fat Tony Salerno would tell them to go F yourself, right?
Right.
Sarcinelli could have done that. Instead, he came up and said, hey, I'm Sam Sarcinelli. He actually showed up with some cordiality to him without being an attention seeker like some people. Right. And at this, you know, he acknowledged the reality that the media obviously is going to be following him. So it's just best to say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? I can't really answer that right now. But
yeah, but he'd say, hey, I'm an open book. Stop by later, and then he'd play a show.
Yes, and then exactly. Then he closes the book.
Yeah.
When Sarcinelli said his business caused him to travel throughout the country, he wasn't exaggerating. Between the spring of 1980 and the spring of 1981, he logged at least 100,000 miles, all in his leased corporate jet. The travels of this Learjet were closely monitored by law enforcement agencies from coast to coast. Though the Van Nuys, California airport was the plane's home base, the aircraft was seldom here. Sarcinelli was more likely on his way to South Florida, to New York City, or to Chicago.
Gee, South Florida in the 1980s, Southern California in the 1980s, to New York and Chicago. Those are like the four hottest zones for blow.
Midway Airport, Sarcinelli's jet was spotted at least a dozen times during the first 3 months of this year alone. The men in the cockpit believe Sarcinelli was transporting precious gems. But law enforcement officials believe this aircraft carried an even more precious commodity, cocaine. On one occasion, as much as 187 pounds of the drug, worth nearly $4.6 million, at the price Sarcinelli is said to have been asking.
Right, and that's
Joining
1980.
Sarcinelli on his transcontinental flights were others with strong links to the cocaine trade. Chicagoan Lawrence Brady was one of Sarcinelli's fellow passengers.
Can't forget, not in love anymore. So I had to do
Brady's
that.
believed to have been one of Sarcinelli's cocaine distributors. In
He won't be singing well, he would be singing He's Not in Love Anymore, but from behind bars, and because his woman dumped him because he's gonna get what, 20 years or something for trafficking blow, it looks like.
your time,
And he was a
Lawrence
former
Brady
cop.
was a Chicago police officer.
Oh yeah, there we go. Ex-cop.
Hey, I actually looked at the
1980.
criminal file. Hold this for a second.
Go
I
ahead.
looked at the criminal file, how he lost being a cop. Have you seen that?
Nuh-uh.
Him and his buddy are driving in a Jaguar, okay? And I'll preface this by saying, like, we've all been busted for something. And when it's in paper, you look like a dumbass, okay? It's never your best moment. So I'll say that going in. But him and his buddy are driving down. They get pulled over. Why? They're in this fancy Jaguar, and the cop doesn't think they have plates, okay? And he's like a 5 years guy on the force, kind of a new guy. He pulls him over. And he walks up, he's like, man, you don't have a plate. And I'm like, we got a plate. And he looks, there's mud splattered all over the plate, right? Which could happen, except that the Jaguar is squeaky clean. So,
Yeah.
for starters, if they hadn't gotten cute and splattered mud on the plate so you couldn't read it, they probably would have never got pulled over. That's the first thing, right? So then he asks for the guy's ID, and he's thinking he's one guy, but his buddy's, the cop's not driving. He's in the passenger seat. Okay, keep that in mind. His buddy gets out and he's like, that's a license. He goes, that's not the car I expected it to be. So he's trying to reconcile who owns the car and who are you and all this, right? So as he's doing that, he looks in the car and he sees a champagne bottle. Okay, it's corked. Nothing illegal about that. But he's like, what do you got there? Is that open? They're like, he's like, yeah, why don't you guys get out of the car? I'll just check it out. Make sure you're not open container, right? Still, they are in no trouble. They are fit to go back in the car and go home. Okay. As they're getting out of the car, one of them grabs a bag of Coke and tries to throw it under the car. Cop sees it.
Oh.
Cop sees it. Right. And I think it was 30 grams. Okay. Something like that. So whatever he got. So they see that now there's trouble. Okay. And the guy's like, look, I'm a cop, blah, blah, blah. What's it going to take to make this? Can you ditch the evidence about it? He goes, no, you're going to jail. The guy don't care, right? Puts him in the car and stuff. And the cop's going like, hey, come on, we're both cops. Why don't you dispose of the evidence? So he's trying to like get the cop to be corrupt now. And the cop's like, yeah, not so much. You're going. And on the way there, he's trying to bribe the cop. He's like, what's it going to take to make this go away? What do you want? You want bread? What you want? You want some Coke? What to make this happen? The cop's just going like, you don't get it, man. I'm straight and you're going to jail. So that's the way this whole thing goes down. And from there, they end up searching his apartments and stuff. Also, when they test the Coke, he says it's personal use. Now he's flipping. It's personal use, blah, 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 right? I think there's 3 bags. One of them isn't Coke. It's nothing illegal. And they're like, well, what's this for and stuff? And they said, well, that's the cut. That's the cut. And so have you ever known anybody in person?
Not a lot of users are cutting their own blow for their own snorted.
That's something
that usually happens.
So that's the story of how he ends up becoming not a cop.
Awesome. That's great.
Brady was busted by other officers in DuPage County, who found in his possession 30 grams of
Hey, you got it. 30 grams.
That's what I thought.
Officer Brady.
Hey, look at that. He looks more like he's going to head off to an Alice Cooper show and get railed up than a police officer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he does look kind of rock star.
He looks like he's like ready to go, hit a early 80s, a rock show. Who knows? Maybe he was one of those cops that used to tell the police force, scheduling folks, I don't mind, patrolling the Van Halen concert, or I don't mind patrolling, because he knew there'd be a lot of drugs and a lot of chicks that do drugs.
Yeah, and I don't know how heavy he was into it, but from this, he's going to become very into it. Because he lost everything.
Got that look, though. He definitely has that look like, you know, that he's more of a crook than a cop.
Department.
Yeah.
But
And 13 months later, he was spotted in Sarcinelli's jet in Chicago, Denver, and Los Angeles. And on April 1st of this year, Grady was again busted, this time in Hoffman Estates with more than 7 pounds of cocaine. Frank
oh, there,
Salcedo-
hey, right there. So that's one of their South American or Mexican connections. If there's ever the look of a 80s Colombian trafficker freaking guy, that's the
Crazy
face
Frank?
of it. That, what's that?
Is that Crazy Frank?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, that's he has, that's the face of like a frazzled up 80s coke trafficker that's big time and
better known as Crazy Frank, was
yes, that's it. Crazy Frank right there.
another passenger on Sarcinelli's jet.
Imagine getting on his bad side, huh?
Oh.
You don't get a name like Crazy Frank without being crazy
Salcedo was believed to be a source of
and
cocaine
doing crazy stuff.
in supply. A large dog guards the entrance to Crazy Frank's motorcycle shop in Sun Valley, California,
Yeah.
where Crazy
There you go. Okay, so now we see the other folks that work with Crazy Frank, and Crazy Frank has the crazy gigantic pit bull.
Like, I don't think Crazy Frank really got busted for this, but he owns a motorcycle shop and he's good. Like, he doesn't need to be in the coke trade and stuff, right? And
Right.
they end up, so I think he kind of skates on this, but later on they catch him. He's in bed with a pharmacist and he's into methamphetamines and stuff. And they do an FBI surveillance. I don't think they get him for the coke with Sarcinelli, but they do get him. He's got some locker. My memory's terrible, but I want to say F49. Okay, there's this locker F49 that they attach to him, and they start doing all these stings and stuff, right? And they get warrants. Have you ever heard of a sneak and peek warrant?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they're doing. These 2 cops got him, and they're doing sneak and peek warrants, looking into stuff, and they're seeing all these like red phosphorus and all these chemicals that are made for methamphetamines and illicit drugs and stuff. Crazy Frank's got no reason to do it. And they start building a case against him. But that was the crux of his testimony, was not that he wasn't doing it, was that you can't do a sneak and peek warrant normally. Like, I can get a warrant on you and I can look through your shit, but there's a time limit that I have to tell you that we did it. They never did. They never did. And that was kind of the crux of the thing, was they did 2 warrants, which led to a 3rd warrant, and they never told him about it. So he never had a chance to clean up, and he never had a chance to, defend himself, whatever. And at first it looked good. It looked good for him. Like they were going to let him go. And then it got overturned. They're like, well, no, because the cops didn't really have bad faith. They've done other stings where they didn't need to do that. Laws are shaky. And they end up reversing it. And I think he does time, maybe 20 years. Don't hold me to that. But he's back out now. And Crazy Frank Enterprises is a motorcycle company. He's famous for building custom fenders and stuff. And to my knowledge, he's still in the game. I don't think he's dead.
All right. We'll have to maybe look into him.
He's interesting.
Frank's employees do not welcome the inquiries of outsiders. Crazy Frank has pleaded guilty to federal charges of cocaine possession. Crazy Frank took at least 10 trips on Sarcinelli's jet. In the neighborhood of $100,000 worth of fuel was purchased by Sarcinelli to keep his jet flying. He paid for all that fuel in cash. When asked why, he replied he preferred the simplicity of cash.
Hey,
I like
back
that
then
answer.
you had to write a check to your credit card. It wasn't as easy as
I like the simplicity. You mean it isn't just as easy to have your card swiped for the gas like most pilots?
Yeah, but then you got to pay it. You got to have accounting. You got to write a check to the credit card company.
Yeah, then you gotta pay later. You gotta pay
Yeah, it's much easier
interest.
to carry a briefcase full of cash.
Guys like me, we don't pay interest. We collect it.
In Laguna Beach, California, Sarcinelli poured additional cash into a real estate operation investigators believe was financed in part with drug money. Located in an office complex not far from the Pacific shore, Sarcinelli's Laguna Real Estate and Construction Company had some
Hey, this isn't too far from where I think Michael Franzese lives. This is Orange County. This is basically what it looks like, you guys. It looks pretty nice.
intriguing backers. The late reputed Chicago mobster Samuel Leonarino was one of Sarcinelli's partners in Laguna. But a silent partner after June 1977, when Anarino was gunned down in a still unsolved mob hit, presumably stemming from Anarino's involvement in stolen cars and cocaine. Walter Micus, presently of Hillside, was Laguna Real Estate's president. Micus is Sarcinelli's brother-in-law and was nabbed last year by the FBI in a raid on a bolita operation in the western suburbs. The Justice Department believes that illegal gambling operation to have been under the direct control of organized crime. Pamela Messina, Sarcinelli's girlfriend, was Laguna's corporate secretary. Messina, like Sarcinelli, is under indictment in Florida for an alleged cocaine conspiracy. The high-priced real estate that Sarcinelli and Laguna purchased, and the homes and buildings Laguna built on it, amassed the company at one point assets of more than $2 million. But Sarcinelli's operation also benefited from the cash contributions of outside investors. And on Laguna Real Estate's partnership documents, the one name that stands out more than any other is that of Howard Carroll. Howard Carroll is an Illinois state senator. He's represented the 15th district for the past 10 years. And on May 19th, 1977, Senator Carroll signed up to become a partner in Laguna Real Estate's most ambitious undertaking.
And I'm willing to predict that when the news cameras pulled up on him, he said, I had no idea. It was just a piece of paper that I signed. I didn't really read the contract.
Back then, they kind of still had your back. You know what I mean? If you were in politics, they gave you the benefit of the doubt. It ain't like now.
Yeah. Well, in today's world, I'm sure what this guy did is child's play compared to the corruption.
Right, but they
$2 million office complex in Laguna Beach known as the Colony. Senator Carroll says he made the investment on the recommendation of a law partner.
And by the way, Carol, I don't blame you. The Colony in Laguna is a pretty nice place. I don't blame you for investing in it at all. I would have advised you to not invest alongside a coke trafficker affiliated with the Chicago outfit. But other than that part, that was a good choice.
But it's the 80s, man. He's like, I thought that's what we were doing.
The client was a North Shore doctor with previous business ties to Sarcinelli. Sam Sarcinelli's involvement in the Colony and Laguna was unknown to the senator. Had you known,
bro, he looks like remember that movie Problem Child, that kid with John Ritter? That's the grown-up version of that's Problem Child once he got to be in his 40s and gets into politics and finds out that his little scheme has been busted.
The only thing on his mind right now, re-election.
Well, I'm sure as soon as that camera pulled up, you see his eyes there. He's thinking, I really hope that my next campaign isn't being ran from Cook County Jail.
Yeah, you got it right.
How would that have affected your decision to invest or not invest?
Not only would we have not invested in it, I think we would have strongly recommended to our client also not to invest in it. And if there was any reason for that client or any other case where they would, for other reasons, still want to invest with those type of people, we wouldn't want to represent them.
Sarcinelli's Laguna Beach real estate business went on the rocks.
I'm going to tell him that over drinks tonight.
Sarcinelli
That's right.
remains in business, but the precise nature of it remains a mystery, despite his apparent wish to satisfy the curious.
Call my office, come in anytime you want. My attorney will be there. I'll answer any questions you want. Any questions you might want, there are many questions you might have.
Can you answer him right now?
If you're not here to answer, just come on in the office, make your appointment, and I'll talk to you. Anything you want to talk about.
It's the afternoon of September 30th. The evening of September 30th, Sarcinelli's attorney said his client would have nothing more to say.
Hey, smooth move though on his part. Hey, I'd love to talk to you. Just make an appointment with my attorney. Come on, you don't need to be sitting out here like this. I want to talk to you. Just call my attorney. We'll make, in fact, we'll get you lunch, and meanwhile, he's like, bye.
But he would provide a written statement. The statement, the attorney said, would come within 4 days. But to this date, Sam Sarcinelli has not responded.
I guess no written statement either, huh?
Nope. He's rocking that Jimmy Walker hat, though.
Remember these cars here, Bill? Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
And his attorney, David Gornell of Sherman Oaks, California, has not responded to our phone calls over the past month. In another area, though, we've had no lack of response from hundreds of would-be conspirators who want to set us up in the drug business. They wanted to fly cocaine for us. They said they were willing to kill to make sure the load got delivered. They told us they could make us millions. You'll meet them dramatic at 10 o'clock when you.
That's a different part of the show, but I'll tell you that part of the show is something else as well, because
Sure is.
they literally, I've seen the whole video on MobFax's channel. They literally put out like an ad in some of the survival magazines back then, those like the old school prepper type mags,
Yeah,
and
Soldier of
other
Fortune, yeah.
High Times magazine, anything counterculture, saying they're looking for people that know how to fly. And they had a bunch of people who hit them up who know how to fly. And one guy explained how they do it. And in fact, one guy reached out who was selling planes to mainly drug traffickers. He was buying old planes that on the normal open market, nobody would want, because they've had so many miles. And anybody who knows how the aircraft business works knows that after planes are flown all over America and Europe for the airlines, oftentimes they sell them to third world or other countries, and then their airlines fly them for a while, or FedEx will pick them up and that kind of thing. Eventually, all planes hit the point where they're down to their last trip. This one guy in particular was literally selling planes for, 100,000 whatever cash, for, knowing that these aren't the kind of planes that are going to be flying more than 1 or 2 or 5 trips at the most.
All right, they're going to fly 1 or 2 times, parachute out, and take that thing down in the Pacific.
Yeah, that's what I'm sure there was a few daredevil kind of pilots who used to do that kind of stuff, where they literally would crash land them.
There's a couple of things I want to point out. Hey, you got to understand, like if you're young, like a millennial or something, you don't understand that the culture was different back then regarding cocaine. Like now they're like the cocaine in the White House. We got to find out who's it was, right? Back then, your teacher did cocaine. Okay, everybody did it. It was party. It wasn't this epidemic that was killing people and stuff. It was still, I think, certainly more in the 70s, but even at the beginning of the 80s when this was happening, cocaine was cool. Everybody was doing it. You're almost not cool if you didn't do it. So there was that kind of a stigma. You know what I mean? Also, how aggressive is this news company that they're going after these guys? Do your news people do this now? Mine don't go undercover and try to buy drugs on the east side of Indianapolis. They're like, man, 3 people were killed. They don't even know who they are. Because we're not going there. You know what I mean? We heard they were killed. Seems like a lot of sirens over on the east side. That's the kind of coverage we get, right? But
lazy news coverage now. It really, a lot of that stuff too. If they were to see, I'm willing to bet that the assemblyman or the state senate or whatever was probably from the Democrat Party. Not to say Republicans are more than willing to take the payoffs too, but in today's world, if that guy, if he's a Democrat, I'm going to assume he is, was to do something, the news may not even cover it at all, or you would have just the more conservative, sort of quasi-conservative leaning outlets, the controlled opposition news outlets that kind of fight each other. Most of those news outlets, CNN, Fox, all of them, are largely infiltrated by intelligence agencies now.
right.
I say this as I have a bachelor's degree in journalism. And even back then when I was in journalism school, we already knew that after the Vietnam War, the Pentagon and the CIA vowed to never lose the narrative on a war again. They lost the narrative on Vietnam with the peace movement. And that was one of the main reasons why the CIA and them even got into Operation Mockingbird and things like that, where they started putting their agents into newsrooms. And over the course of many, many years, now they just have a lot of people built into there, or they have people that are compromised that are working for these news organizations. But so you're not going to see a whole lot of that kind of investigative stuff. The only time I've noticed that stuff comes out is when the power structure that we have, the monetary money power structure we have, just gets tired of a politician overall. And when they decide it's time to go, that's when you'll start seeing all the scandals actually covered.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we're shocked to find out that he was corrupt the whole time. But
right.
Sarcinelli and his girlfriend, I think her name was like Messina or something.
Yes.
They had their little wiggle out thing like Crazy Frank tried to. their thing was first of all, he got busted, right? They busted him at the airport with like 50,000 in cash. Then they raided his hotel room and they find all this cocaine and all this other stuff. So he's busted. His girlfriend, they've got her coordinating things, right? She was like a go-between. She was a runner. They got her cold too. At some point, they're trying to get the discovery evidence. Okay. And I guess for whatever reason, the DA is like, yeah, I'm having trouble with the DA and blah, blah, blah. And there's a time frame that they're trying to get the discovery so they can go into trial and know what the evidence is against them, right? They blow it. They blow it. And they don't give it to them in time. And it's a judge overturns it and says that's not admissible anymore. So the money, the coke, none of that's admissible anymore. It has to be suppressed, right? And it's looking good. But of course, there's an appeal to that. And they go back and forth. And what was the intention? And why didn't you give it to them? And they honestly, there's still debate to this day. When you look at, you can look it up. They argue the case today because they're like, look, it's ridiculous. If it was anybody else, this would be thrown out because it was so irregular. But what they came to at the time, because I think they just didn't want to let him go, they said, look, you already knew what the discovery was. The discovery was we caught you at the airport with $50,000 of money, and then we searched your home, and you had cocaine and weapons or whatever else. So you already knew everything, and we got you on wire busting people. Well, you already knew that because you were freaking there when it happened. And they was like, yeah, that's good enough, And then they moved forward, and of course, he got busted.
Yeah, there it is.
But he's still alive, right?
I believe he is. I looked him up, and I've seen his birth date, and
1933.
he doesn't seem to have a death date, and so I think he was born around 1940 or 37, something like
He was
that.
33.
He's been around for a while, but well, see, he was they said he was 48, and that was in 81 or 80 when this newscast came out.
And his big bust, he was 47.
So he might still be around. In fact,
I'm pretty sure he is, and he's probably pushing 90. And he owns a bar in Chicago called Polecats.
Okay, I've read that as well. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Yes, that's one of those clubs where the women are scantily clad, if you will, right?
It's interesting too because polecat, isn't that a skunk?
A what?
A polecat, isn't that like a southern skunk? That's what they call skunks.
I'm not sure, but
I think it is. So I think they were trying to be cute like a cat on a pole, but really it's a smelly girl if you think about it.
Yeah, once you said that the skunk phrase,
it brings
up. I have a relatively sick mind at times, and so the jokes that I was getting ready to say, I'm like, well, I better not say some of them.
Well, good. So you get what I'm throwing.
Yeah, I get where you're going, and it's not somewhere that I'd be flowing. So,
exactly. So I think that bar's still open. He's like a silent partner in it. There was a big scandal about that, and he was out of jail by then. And they were like, it's mob owned. They're trying to like fish out that it's mob owned and stuff. But they talked to him, and they asked him about he was busted for insurance fraud before all the cocaine, and he said, I put that behind me. That's my whole life. And I believe it. He's 90. I don't think he's real active in the mob now.
Well, aside from that, he doesn't have a mob around him anymore. Anybody that was in Chicago moved to California a long time ago. Accardo and a lot of those guys moved to Palm Springs. And so as it was in the 90s, they were already winding down a bit. You get to Operation Family Secrets, and the Family Secrets trial, you have, I believe it was Frank Calabrese that ended up sort of closing the door for the Chicago outfit. And by then you see that there really wasn't a lot of the old school players left. But that also demonstrated how many of them actually got away with it, because you never saw Accardo do very much time. John DeFranzo was an alleged boss. He passed away, 2019 or something. So, John DeFranzo, he was the alleged boss. I'm not going to say he was or wasn't, because the FBI is the only one who says that alleges he was. There's not really a whole lot of court stuff. Same thing out here. the guy that ran San Jose, California, Joe Cerritos, well, you know, you look at his California file from the 70s, it says he doesn't have a record in California, but he was indicted in Italy by the Italian federal police because of his ties to the Sicilian mob there. And you know, he basically survived without any major stuff.
Right.
Same thing with a lot of the other guys in some of these other areas. And I think a lot of that could be attributed to less heat. More of the FBI strike force focus was in the East for.
Yeah, well, it was easy too. I mean, New York made it real easy for them. That's a frustration for guys like us that try to report. The guys that are the most interesting to me are the smartest guys, and there's damn little on them, you know, because there's not this FBI file you can just read.
Well, and by definition, when you're in that life, your goal is to stay concealed and get away with what you're doing. Your goal is not to write a movie script for the future, or as I would tell certain individuals who didn't understand how the old era worked, back in the 90s, I wasn't doing things anticipating there would be this thing called YouTube, and I would one day do a YouTube show where I spill my guts, because I'm not going to spill my guts. There's certain people I won't talk about. You can offer me millions of dollars, and it's not worth my life. There's guys in California that still take this stuff serious. And there's actually been Mexican YouTubers who've been, you know, by the MA guys for saying too much on their shows. And so the reality is that there's a lot of people out there. And quite frankly, some of the guys I dealt with are now doing great in life. They have nothing to do with it. And if I was to start saying their names, I'm putting their names out there, and it's a form of defamation, in my opinion. Unless somebody tells me explicitly, you have permission to use my name on your show, I don't do it. And
Right, it would be rude.
Yeah, and people on my Facebook page who follow me, you actually can see that different individuals from cases I was involved with are my friends on Facebook still, and they'll like my posts. And occasionally you'll see somebody say, hey, I appreciate you telling that story the way that you did. Look, there's the last situation that I was ever really could have had a federal problem was Operation Greenspeaker, which was a marijuana case in 2005 out here, which was a joint task force, DEA, feds, local, all that stuff, California Bureau of Narcotics, everybody. And there's a guy who informed in that case who, you know, follows me on Facebook, and he likes my posts about it too. And it's obvious he knows I'm telling the truth about my role and how things got through. There's also 2 or 3 guys who were prosecuted in that case who are now out of federal prison who also like the same post. And they all know, you know, and they know that, you know, that the one dude snitched and this guy didn't. But there was no homicides or violence that the DEA could tie to the guys that were prosecuted. And when you get hit with RICO and there's no violence, that lowers the amount of time a lot. And if you've got a marijuana case that's federal and the FBI can't prove that you killed anybody in the course of it, you can get hit with a RICO still, but that's when judges have more leeway, and you'll see guys getting a few years or 5 years and, you know, 7 years, 10 years rather than.
And to that point, I think when there's in the lack of a homicide, the RICO is designed to make you broke and to seize all your stuff.
Yes, it absolutely. In fact, every single dude that I knew that was prosecuted in that case, including the informant that I knew, and actually there was 2 informants that I knew of, but one of them that I, you know, was actually in communication with around the time of the whole thing. It bankrupted him too.
Right.
He had to give up a bunch of assets as a part of his rat deal. You know, he had to give up money too.
A lot of times those assets, it doesn't matter how you got them. They're taking everything.
Yeah, and so it's just the way they do it. The feds, you know, some people assume that when the feds put substantial cooperation on your file, it's automatically a snitch deal. That's usually the case, but in some cases, they will count substantial assistance credit for you if you help them give away your assets. If you help them find money, there's a guy, I'm not going to say his name right now, but I chat with on Instagram, who was a marijuana trafficker in New York, and he was arrested by the DEA. They knew that he had gold bars, and they made him dig up millions upon millions of gold bars from upstate New York. And I've chatted with him. He wasn't happy. He tried giving them just $1 million or $2 million, and they're like, no. You think we're rookie agents? We know that a guy like you, there's more. And he dug up more. And then they're like, you're not done yet. We believe there's more. And it hits like 10 million. And then finally they're like, you probably have some more left, but we'll go with the 10, all right, and he got himself a couple of years rather than a lot longer. But it's still
your whole life and all you risked and all the shit he went through for those bars.
Oh, it's got to be so painful watching the DEA and the FBI with their shovels and with their equipment pulling your gold out the ground.
And your wife going, I should have married Gary Snodnowski. It's the greatest day of your life.
Real quick, plug your website, Bill, and we'll call it a day on this show, and we'll start doing this regular.
Yeah, check out my website. It's www.partners in crime. Just like that, you got partners-n-crime. And virtually every podcast I do is kind of umbrellaed under that website. You'll find them all. Also,
and I, of course,
go
ahead.
You can catch me Friday nights, 9:10 a.m. Superstation, big radio station in Detroit. Believe it or not, me and Gunnar do a show Friday nights. We share a radio station with Al Sharpton.
Hold on. So Al Sharpton
is a regular. He's got a show on that same channel. It's called
good old Al
Network.
Well, let's call Mike Franzese up. Ask him about good old Al.
Yeah.
I loved it when Mike Franzese did that HBO special where he was like, Al Sharpton worked for us. If a business didn't cooperate, there would be race-based picketing all of a sudden, and with the Coke thing. And when they went back, of course, Al denies it, right? And this is years ago when Al Sharpton still had a powerful kind of reputation as the kind of dude, the kind of civil rights guy you don't want messing with your business, right? And they go back to Mike Franzese. Well, Al denies it, and Mike Franzese is like, look, I know what he did. Al knows what he did. He went like that kind of thing. And then they go back to Al, and Al's like, no comment. We're not talking about Mike Franzese. We ain't talking about no Mike Franzese.
Talk to my lawyer. I'm an open book. He'll tell you anything you want to know.
I'm an open book other than this, and this. You can ask me anything but. Anything but. But,
to be clear, Al has nothing to do with me and Gunnar. We never spoke.
Al is one of those controlled opposition guys, by the way. For anybody out there, I hate to bust your bubble, but nearly all of the so-called civil rights movement of today are compromised. I can guarantee every single one of those leaders, there's dirt on them somewhere. There is no way that J. Edgar Hoover's old FBI that used to have a field day taking out guys like Malcolm X and others are going to ever allow uncontrolled civil rights leaders. And what I mean by that is they'll know if a guy in the movement is doing drugs, and they'll be like, don't arrest him. Keep an eye on, one of his guys. They know if they have sexual improprieties. They get all that too. And they can always, hey, when it comes time to cooperate on other matters, you better believe if the feds have filmed you messing around on your woman and things like that, they are going to let you know that they have that too. And even though it's not blackmail because they're hitting you with a criminal case and they just happen to record this other stuff with it, they still tell you, hey, once we file the criminal charges, we're throwing that stuff in there, and eventually your woman's going to read about it if she doesn't find out sooner. And you can control people with information and with dirt. And it's really, and with drug laws and other stuff, there's almost no way that these movements get anywhere without somebody that can be compromised and somebody that can always, let the government and the powers that be know what's going on. So Al Sharpton, if you wanted to know how he was compromised, Mike Franzese answered that one for you. Probably a Coke case, the mob stuff. I guarantee the FBI and the other civil rights guys who are tied in, all have told Al behind the scenes, don't you get too far out of line with us. You'll notice
Right.
Al will complain about the NYPD. He'll complain about a lot of police forces. When was the last time you heard Al Sharpton complain about the FBI?
Never.
Not
Okay,
often.
but
They
him
may
and
let him
Jesse
do it
Jackson,
once.
They want to be in the same ilk with Martin Luther King Jr. and they want to be with Malcolm X. But if they were in the same ilk, they'd be dead. So that tells you right there.
And the truth is that we don't live in the same circumstances as we did. As much as a lot of people today would love to be dramatic and claim that, oh God, this is the worst country ever and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
The fact of the matter is that the conditions that permitted Malcolm X to rise, or MLK, or some of the local guys in Chicago and the other civil rights leaders that were more on the ground back then, Fred Hampton's, etc. The reason why is because there was outright segregation. There was outright, when you went to the bathroom in certain states, there was a sign that said which bathroom you could go on to.
Or a bar you could eat at.
Yeah. And in some of the northern cities and in the West Coast, there was unwritten racial rules. If you look at the way LA used to be, there used to be these covenants where certain parts of LA real estate agents weren't able to show black couples the houses because they were banned from buying homes in certain areas. So
Right, there were separate sports leagues. You got to wrap your head around that. Look at it
in
now.
today's world, let's just be honest, it's nowhere near what it was 60 years ago. So the need for most of these civil rights leaders really isn't even there anyways.
So
And in many cases, it's just to create confusion. And in most cases, I'm going to tell you right now, they are there to create political confusion in America.
And division.
There's people that misdirect their anger. And rather than focusing on making our conditions better, which is what our grandparents' generation used to do, passing laws to make workplace safety stop and a few safety net things, keeping our parks together and our society going. They want us
laws
arguing,
that protected our minorities and got us where we
yeah, they want us directing our attention at one another. And it's a classic scam where if you got citizens fighting one another, the people that are instigating the fighting get to walk away with all the gold, so to speak. And that's usually how it works. It's usually based on money at the end of the day. So hence why I stopped working in politics altogether a few years ago. Because as they say, they're all crooks except for my friends. My friends were not, right? They're all crooks except for my guys.
And the only good crooks are me.
That's right. The only good crooks, every 10 years, there's a new FBI investigation at the city hall in the city I grew up in. And so that lets you know, no matter who's in charge, every so often, the house has to be cleaned up a bit. They don't always clean it up all the way, but they usually, every so often, there's something happening. So meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Thank you. Hit the like button, share, subscribe, and ring the bell.